Hello, I'm Peggy Vasquez. I'm an international speaker, an author, and a connection coach. I live in Washington State, and I'm married to an incredible husband, Renee, and together we have 4 amazing children and 7 of the most beautiful, brilliant grandchildren you can imagine. On top of all that, I'm still working full-time as a chief executive assistant. Chances are high that I've been where you are and I've faced some of the same struggles and challenges that you may be facing in developing a powerful partnership. I'm going to share with you real life examples of what works and what doesn't work based on my experience. I want to begin by letting you know the greatest secret of all: we're the ones running the world. That's right, administrative professionals are the ones running the world. Our managers spend 80% of their day either in meetings or on the road or both. And who is left in the office to keep the business running? We are. And what do we want for it? Respect. Yes, that's exactly what we want. The truth is, many of us don't feel valued and respected all the time. Am I right? How many of you have ever said or heard someone say, "I'm just an admin"? I have heard it. In fact, I am guilty of it. I've heard so many admins say it. In fact, I've heard it so much that it's almost like someone is playing the same song over and over, and you know exactly what the next lyric is going to be. Hearing other admins say they were just an admin is the reason I became an international speaker. It's the reason why I wrote my book, Not Just an Admin. It is my goal to eliminate that sentence from everyone's vocabulary and to help you realize how powerful and incredible you are as an admin, so that you will never, ever, 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 ever say that you are just an admin again. How do I know how valuable you are? Well, just take a look at some of the things that people count on us to deliver. Things like correspondence, event planning, project management, travel, compliance, technology, public relations, and on it goes. Plus the ambiguous anything else that I may need you to do, part of your job description, right? Not to mention, when you think about our positions, they are so broad and so deep, it is difficult to know where they start and where they end. Words matter. Words are incredibly important. Whether you are watching this webinar alone or you are with a group of people, I want you to say this out loud. I want you to say, "I feel terrible." Say, "I feel horrible." Now, how do you feel? I would bet that you feel pretty horrible. Now I want you to say, "I feel fantastic." Say, "I feel incredible." How do you feel? I would bet that you feel pretty incredible right now. Do you notice a difference? The positive energy comes from our positive words. And the same is true for negative words. The most dangerous weapon, the most powerful weapon that you possess is your tongue. Words matter. Words have the power to start and to stop a war. So choose your words carefully. We already decided that we aren't going to say, "I'm just an admin" again. We also need to stop referring to the administrative staff that you work with as the girls in the office. Think about it. Girls are children. We are professionals. I've never heard a man say the boys in the office. Instead of referring to them as the girls, refer to them as your colleagues, the admin team, the support team. In my office, we refer to each other as the A-team. I absolutely love that one. And yes, you can borrow it. To help you know without a doubt the value that you bring to the table, I've got 4 questions for you that showcase how you provide value to your organization. So go ahead and pause the webinar for a moment and write down your answer to these questions. Keep in mind that your answer to question number 1 should be at least 10 answers, if not more. If you're with a group, you can, after you've all finished answering these questions, you can keep the video on pause and have a discussion about these things, because this is going to determine and it's going to help you see the value that you bring to the table. Have you noticed that it's not your position that gives you power? It's your behavior. Think of Steve Carell in The Office. He has positional power, but he does not have leadership power. This is true whether you're the CEO or the assistant. It's all about your behavior. How would you describe a leader? Go ahead and write down your definition, and I'll pause for just a moment so that you can write down your answer. Based on how you define leadership, let me ask you, are you a leader? What percentage of time do you spend on that behavior that you wrote down? What I usually hear when I'm doing this at a workshop is 80 to 100%. I've kept a running list of the top 10 definitions of leadership from all of my workshops, and here they are. I'm sure that you have even better descriptions. And if you would love to send them to me, I would be happy to receive them. You can email me at peggy@peggyvasquez.net. I would love to hear your description. The other thing that I think is really great is it's the time when you realize that the way that you've defined leadership actually describes yourself. Because when I look at this list of definitions, administrative assistants demonstrate these things every single day. Every single day. That's why the answer was 80 to 100%. When you realize that you are a leader, you act differently. When you realize you're a leader, you act differently. Communication is absolutely paramount for a powerful partnership. What matters is that you are talking routinely and you're keeping each other in the loop. I'm a huge fan of the daily meeting. It can be a face-to-face meeting for 5 minutes or as long as you need. It can be a phone call, a Skype meeting, or an email. If the executive has time for only one phone call, the first person that they should call should be their assistant. Why do you think this is true? Because the assistant always has information to help the manager and to keep the business moving forward. Communication is the only way to know what's going on and to learn what each other needs. Communication is also how you stay in touch with shifting priorities. Consider the daily meeting a project with many pieces and parts, because in some ways it's actually quite complex. During the meeting, you're going to listen, observe, and ask questions. This is how you're going to find out more about who your executive is, what their preferences are, and what's important to them. During the daily meeting, you've got 4 different roles. You are the detective that is picking up clues and cues. You are the student who's studying your manager to learn their communication style. You are an observer. You are a communications guru who notices your manager's body language. This is a huge part of learning your manager's communication style and knowing when your manager has mentally checked out. Often admins are detail-oriented people and can share too many details. If your manager is gesturing you to move on or leaning back in their chair as if they're about ready to pass out, you are probably sharing too much information and need to change your approach. Your daily meeting is also the everyday event that connects you to your manager and demonstrates your value. Don't discount the importance of this meeting. It should be crucial for your manager's success, and you, the assistant, are the one that is going to make your manager know it. In your daily meeting, you're going to review their calendar and discuss upcoming travel, visitors, meetings, presentations, all to determine what does your manager need to be prepared. Do they need talking points, background material, presentations, bios? What is it that they need? Put yourself in their shoes and consider, if you were going to a meeting, what would you need to be prepared for that meeting? If you were invited to an event, what would you need to know about your role in order to be prepared? When people ask to meet with your manager, ask them, what is the purpose? What is the goal? What is the desired outcome? And give that information to your manager to help them to be prepared. When you get really good at asking those questions, you won't even have to ask them anymore because people will know you're going to ask. One of the best things that assistants do is they save managers time. They save money by saving them time. And the way that you do that is by each and every day making sure that your manager is prepared for every event, every meeting that's on their calendar. You'll also provide an update on outstanding issues and action items. There are many tools for tracking deliverables. I strongly suggest that you bring your tool with you into the meeting to demonstrate that you're tracking their actions. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what tool you use. What matters is that you're consistently using the tool. Often, actions will be given or received in a meeting that you aren't attending, or a conversation that happens over the phone or down the hallway. To find out what those actions are, to find out what happens in a meeting, ask questions. What I used to do is I used to ask, how did the meeting go? And what do you get back when you ask that question? You get a response of, it was good, it was fine, it was all right, or it was a waste of my time. So you find out overall about the tone of the meeting, but you don't find any details. So ask a follow-up question. What decisions were made and what actions did you give or receive? Now you're finding out what actually happened in that meeting. Depending on what's happening in your organization, you're also going to provide an update on staff issues. Often admins are their manager's eyes and ears, right? Staff often come to us and they tell us all sorts of things. Sometimes we're thinking, I didn't even really want to know that. Thank you very much. Other times it's good information to have. Your manager does not need to hear all the gossip and all the churn. What your manager needs to hear, if there are key themes emerging. If you've had several staff come to you and basically tell you the same thing, something that they're concerned about, something they don't understand, that's what your manager needs to hear so that the manager can address those things before they become a big problem. To take your partnership to the next level, ask open-ended questions. I remember early in my career, I would be meeting with my manager and I'd get through my long list of items that I wanted to cover. I always had them in priority order just in case if the meeting got interrupted that I could get through what I had to get through. And then I would stand up as if the meeting was over. And I noticed one day that my manager was still seated, which told me the meeting wasn't over. So I sat back down and I simply said, what else do you need? That taught me a very powerful lesson because when I asked that question, we had a lengthy conversation about several different things that weren't on my radar, things that weren't on my list. We were no longer talking about travel and scheduling. We were talking about the business. And so I've learned how to ask those open-ended questions. Questions like, what's on your mind? What are you concerned about? What are the top 3 priorities for the day? What is your main focus for the week? And my favorite question to ask after you've created a strong partnership is, what do you want your enduring legacy to be? And when you and your manager are talking about their legacy, you are in a powerful partnership stage. Once you know what they want their enduring legacy to be and you go to work to help them deliver on it, I promise you, you will be treasured for a lifetime. Remember, your manager is not the expert at being the assistant, you are. It is up to you as the assistant to bring all that you can to the partnership by demonstrating how your position can be an asset to the manager. Ultimately, the role of the administrative assistant is to make her manager be more successful with them than they can be without them. You're aiming for synergy, which means that you are better together than who you are separately. I've been asking managers for years now, what are their top 3 skill sets for a successful administrative assistant? And flexibility is always in the top 3. You've got to stay flexible. How many of you would like to have a partnership assessment to figure out how well your partnership is doing right now? Well, I've got a tool to help you do that. It's basically a set of questions, and the way that it works is that you read through the question and you answer how you think your manager would answer. And then later you compare your manager's answer to your own. So in the beginning, you've got questions like, when is the best time to schedule your daily meeting? When is the best time to approach your manager regarding a sensitive subject? When is the best time to schedule a top priority, a high-level meeting? And what are your manager's pet peeves and quirks? And I'll tell you something about these pet peeves. I was working for a president for about 3 months when I finally found out that he had a pet peeve about keeping a coffee cup on my desk. I'd been working there, and every day my coffee cup would disappear. And I would ask those in the executive suite, I would say, does anyone know where my coffee cup is? And no one would answer. Finally, after about 3 months, one of my coworkers pulls me aside and tells me that the president doesn't want any food or any drinks on anyone's desk. You see, he was very formal, and he wanted a formal executive environment. And so in his opinion, what that meant was that we took 2 coffee breaks a day. That's where we drank coffee. We took a lunch break every day, and we ate lunch in the break room, never at the desk. You've got to know what your manager's pet peeves and quirks are, because you might be doing something very basic that is driving them crazy. So find out the answers. These next questions are a little bit deeper. What are your manager's major responsibilities and priorities? What are your manager's expectations for voicemail, email, and action tracking? And what are your manager's expectations regarding how the administrative assistant acts independently and on behalf of the manager? You've got to know the answers to these questions. More often than not, when I ask assistants how easily they can answer these questions, it's much harder to answer these second questions than the previous slide. Once you understand what your manager wants you to do, where your boundaries are, how much leeway that you have to act on their behalf, you're going to be able to create a much more powerful partnership than guessing. Go through this together. Tell your manager about this great webinar that you watched and this new tool to assess your partnership. And then walk through this tool with them, get the answers, have a discussion. And actually, it's probably going to open up a lot more discussion. Have any of you felt like this when it comes to communication with your manager, where you just want to say, manager, listen, listen, listen? Well, the reason why that happens is because of our communication styles. We speak different languages based on our style, our background, our culture, and life experiences. And it's due to these differences that we can find ourselves in the middle of a conversation where it seems like you're speaking a completely different language. I've got a tool to help you increase your effectiveness with communication. It's based on the fact that we're all unique and we each have our preferred method of communicating. My model has 4 behavior patterns. Variations of 4 basic behavior patterns have been around for over 2,500 years. We have been trying to figure each other out for a long, long time. Most of you have probably heard of or have participated in the Myers-Briggs type indicator. That was actually created back in 1923 by Carl Jung. And I love this quote: everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. I've been fascinated with communication for as long as I can remember, so I naturally started researching why we communicate the way we do. Through my research, I've discovered there are many communication models available, and I've learned that behavior is predictable. We have our preferred way of communicating, which turns into habits and how we deal with people. Those actions are reinforced through practice, year after year of behaving the same way. Over time, our behaviors turn into observable patterns. This is exactly why assistants can predict what their manager will do in a given situation. Here's the thing though, our communication style seems normal to us It seems comfortable to us, but it may or may not be so comfortable and normal to someone else. Here's a condensed version of my favorite model with 4 different communication styles. The driver is results focused, and at their best, they are candid, strong-willed, independent, decisive, practical, efficient, and determined. The expressive is ideas focused, and at their best, they are ambitious, enthusiastic, visionary, fun-loving, friendly, and influential. The amiable is people-focused, and at their best, they are loyal, supportive, respectful, dependable, agreeable, and perceptive. The analytical is process-focused, and at their best, they are efficient, focused, goal-oriented, realistic, independent, and determined. Based on this quick descriptions, which one are you? Go ahead and write down your answer. And which one is your manager? Go ahead and write down your answer. When I do this in a workshop, I ask people to raise their hand, and the interesting thing is I've never had one area completely empty. Every time people raise their hand, there's somebody for each of the 4 areas. And the reason why is because this is about how you prefer to communicate. This isn't about your chosen profession. This isn't about your brilliance. It's simply the way that you prefer to communicate. We all have pluses and minuses. The previous slides were our pluses, and here's the minuses. The driver at their worst can be harsh, controlling, short-sighted, abrasive, pushy, and power-seeking. The expressive at their worst can be overbearing, unrealistic, egotistical, undisciplined, manipulative, and hasty. The amiable at their worst can be comforting, needy, unsure, dependent, awkward, and easily manipulated. And the analytical at their worst can be critical, indecisive, old-fashioned, hard to please, moralistic, and unemotional. And speaking of analytical, they may have noticed that on this slide, I have different font sizes, and they're probably wondering why. Well, it's just because I didn't notice it until right now. Please don't get hung up on this. One of the things that I've learned is that if you want grace, you've got to give grace. So please give me some grace on that. So take a look at what you wrote down, what style you thought you were, and what style you thought your manager was. Do you still recognize each other? Any surprises? We're at our worst when we are stressed out, when we're on the brink of missing a deadline, when we're going through unexpected change, when we didn't get enough sleep, when we're not feeling well. To communicate at your optimum, you need to understand who your manager is, both at their best and at their worst. This will help you to know how they are wired instead of just looking at something that they're doing, taking it personally, and filling in all these stories in your mind, making things up. Instead, understand who they are, understand how they're wired. Take some time and do some studying on their style so that you can help fill the gap. Let's take a look through the strengths of each style and areas of caution. So for the driver, their strengths are they are bottom line, they speak forcefully, they present strongly. The areas of caution are they are impatient, they like to argue, they actually think it's great fun to have a sparring match. They are also a poor listener. The expressive, their strengths are they are persuasive, big picture, and motivated. The caution is they tend to exaggerate. They get so caught up in the expressive nature that they may not always stay factual. They lose detail, and they can be overdramatic. The amiable, their strengths are they are supportive, they create a trust and harmonious environment, and they are incredibly great at listening. The cautions are they avoid conflict, they can be overly considerate, and they keep their opinions to themselves. The analytical, their strengths are they are precise, concise, and they speak efficiently. The caution, they focus too much on details, they can be terse, and they lack a variety of vocal tones. They are monotone. Does this help to see your manager even more than before? To have powerful communication with your manager, you need to know their style. Take some time and study these things. Try some things on. See if you can pinpoint where they land. If you think about it, it's up to you as a support professional to help balance out your manager, to help them shine, to help make them look good. So if you know their areas of strength and areas of challenge, especially in times of change and stress and shifting priorities, which I guess when you really think about it, it's almost every single day, when you have that information, you can help them to be more successful. I love this comic. My words came out fine. They were processed incorrectly by your brain. Frustrations often come when we work with someone that has an opposite style from us. So for example, think about the administrative professional that has the expressive style. Their style at their worst can be overdramatic and loses details. Imagine she's partnered with a manager that is an analytical, and at their worst, he can focus too much on details and is monotone. Talk about an instant clash, and it's based on how we are wired. Remember that no one style is better than another. What's key is to figure out how to work with people. I know that we've covered a lot of information and we're going through it pretty quickly. So to help you remember about each style, I've got 6 takeaway tips. The driving style. Number 1, respect their time. Be on time. Show up on time. Deliver on time. Number 2, stick to the facts. They don't want to hear about your big expressive story. Number 3, follow up on your promises. When you promise something, make sure that you deliver. Number 4, show your competence. These people want you to show fully up, completely show what you have to bring to the table. They admire competency. Number 5, earn their trust before you expect it. And number 6, let them have some control, if not all of the control. 6 tips for the expressive style. Laugh with them. They want to enjoy life. Number 2, listen to their opinions because they've got a lot to say. Number 3, think big picture. If you want a brainstorming person, the expressive is your perfect partner. Number 4, recognize their contributions. They are motivated by recognition. 5, lighten up already. It's really not that serious. And 6, form a friendship. 6 tips for the amiable style. Number 1, approach conflict carefully. Remember, these folks are conflict averse. Number 2, get to know them as a person, not just an employee. 3, consider their perspective. They're great listeners. They've got a ton of insight to offer. So number 4, draw out their opinions. And 5, handle issues in private. 6, always be courteous. These people are the kindest people, will do anything for you. Make sure you're returning the favor. 6 tips for the analytical style. Number 1, take your time. If you would just take your time, you would get it right. Number 2, communicate clearly and concisely. Number 3, don't pressure for answers. The more you pressure, the more that they're going to withdraw. Number 4, respect their processes. They have a wonderful process for everything. 5, ask directly for their feedback. They have a lot to say if you were to ask. And 6, give them space. They prefer to work autonomously. Not only do we speak differently based on our culture, our background, and our communication style, we also speak differently based on our gender. Our brains are different both in structure and chemistry. Women have 11% more neurons in their brains for emotion, feelings, and communication. It is no wonder that women have a need to say more words than a man. One of the major differences in how men and women communicate is that men use language to report and women use language to build rapport. Men prefer the headline and women prefer the story. Women enjoy sharing all the details involved and even say what they consider to be the best for last. Men, on the other hand, favor succinct phrases and talk about things. Men want information, women want connection. Remember, there are exceptions to every rule and piece of research. When communicating with a man, deliver the important information up front. When communicating with a woman, be careful to avoid using tones that sound curt or abrupt. Or in simple terms, women are like a plate of spaghetti. The noodles are touching and overlapping and intertwined with the sauce and the meatballs. Everything is connected. It's the same way in a woman's mind. We're thinking about everything we need to get done while we're driving to work. At the same time, we're thinking about our daughter that's away at college, wondering how she's doing. And then that leads us to her empty bedroom, which is just down the hallway from the main bathroom that we want to have retiled. And then we're thinking about the tile sample that we need to pick up. And then we remember that right by the place we're going to pick up the tile is where we need to pick up our dry cleaning. On and on it goes. One thought leading to the next, connected by a string of thoughts and emotions. Men, on the other hand, are like a waffle with compartments. It's the same way that a man's mind operates. When they're at work, they're in that compartment. They walk out of that compartment, they close the door, they go into their home compartment. They go into their sports compartment. It's very compartmentalized. This is why a man is confused when his wife asks him, "What are you thinking about?" when he's watching the Super Bowl. He's watching the Super Bowl. It's almost like alarms go off in his head, wondering, why is she asking me this trick question? Recognize that there is a difference, which means we need to adjust our communication style to be more effective. So why does all this matter? Because understanding style allows you to identify the preferences of others and modify your behavior to communicate more effectively. This is known as being versatile. So what is versatility? Well, it is the key for creating powerful communication and partnerships. And where do you need to be versatile? Go ahead and write down your answer. The answer is everywhere, anywhere that there's people. Versatile people leverage the strengths of their style and others, and they respond appropriately to the uniqueness of each style. Being versatile doesn't mean being a chameleon. It's about modifying your approach so that you can communicate and respect the uniqueness of each person that you're talking to. Think about when you're talking to a child. You don't talk to them the same way that you talk to an adult. That doesn't mean that you changed who you were. Doesn't mean that you changed your personality. You simply modified your approach to the audience. And if you still need motivation to increase your versatility, here it is. Research has shown that administrative professionals with higher versatility perform better at leading teams, coaching others, and are more likely to get promoted. I hope that you think of feedback as a gift. I certainly do. There is no way that I would have grown into who I am today without feedback. I'm thankful that I've had friends that will tell me the truth, that would tell me exactly what I need to hear and not what I wanted to hear. And it's the same way for your colleagues and especially for your boss. Whether you're on the receiving end or giving end, feedback can be difficult. A tool that I've used for years is called SBI. S is for situation, B is for behavior, I is for impact, and then you close with a message or with next steps. The next time when you need to give someone feedback, use this tool to frame it, to get your mind figured out exactly how you're going to provide that feedback. How many of you are giving feedback to your boss? Giving feedback to your boss is incredibly important. It provides the opportunity to learn invaluable development lessons. And the truth is, working closely with anyone gives you useful insight into their performance. And it's especially true for you with your boss. You see your boss in a variety of settings, meetings with clients, meetings with internal and external customers, providing presentations. You see them in negotiations. You see them in team meetings. It's the perfect seat to provide the feedback that they need. It can be tricky, but every time you do it, you're going to get better and better at it. And when you learn to offer it and offer it carefully, correctly, thoughtfully, your insight to help your boss will also improve your working relationship, because they'll know that you're doing all that you can to help them be successful. They'll know that you have their back and you're willing to risk it. You're willing to be courageous enough to have the conversation. The reason that you should give feedback is because leadership is all about perception. If leaders do not know how they are perceived, what's going to happen? I mean, their performance is going to suffer. And the higher and higher up in an organization a leader sits, the harder and harder it is to get honest feedback. It's rare that leaders will actually get the unvarnished truth, and they need it. Too many people are smoothing over the messages. Your feedback can help your boss see herself as others see her and help her to make critical adjustments in her behavior and approach so that she can be more successful. Here's some principles to keep in mind. Number one, relationship is king. Your ability to openly and honestly give and receive feedback is dependent on the relationship between you and your boss. Without trust, the feedback will be much harder, if not impossible, to receive. So before giving feedback, you need to gauge whether your boss will be open to what you have to say. If you know that your boss is unreceptive to feedback or will react negatively, or if you have a rocky relationship, it's better to focus on building the relationship than on giving the feedback. However, if your boss is open-minded and you have a good relationship, then you owe him the straight talk. As with any feedback, your intentions must be good, and your desire to help your boss should supersede any issues that you may have. Principle number two is the feedback invited or asked? If you have a great relationship, launching into unsolicited feedback is a practice skill. Trust and timing are key. Ideally, your boss has asked for your input and made it clear what would be helpful in terms of feedback. So for example, your boss may have asked for feedback about certain developmental areas. Maybe he's asked you to keep an eye out for certain behaviors that he's working on. In a perfect world, a manager would make it safe to give feedback, but in the real world, that may or may not always happen. So if your boss does not directly request feedback, ask if they're open to receiving feedback. Just ask them a question. Would it be helpful if I gave you feedback on this new presentation you're putting together? Would it be helpful for me to give you feedback when I notice how your direct reports respond to you in a meeting? Ask the question. Remember, it's got to be presented in the best intentions. Avoid sounding like you want to give feedback out of revenge, and demonstrate that you're willing to help your boss improve. Principle number three. Your feedback should focus on what you're seeing or hearing, not what you would do if you were the boss. Frame the feedback in form of your perception, such as, I noticed at the meeting today, you came across like you'd already made up your mind and didn't want a discussion. By sharing your perspective, you can help your boss to see how others are seeing him. This can be invaluable to a leader who may be disconnected from his staff. Remember, the good feedback rules still apply. Your feedback should be honest and data-driven. Avoid accusations. Remember that people react much better to specifics than to generalities, so use details to back up your points. Principle number four. No matter how carefully or thoughtfully you prepared and delivered your feedback, you may have done it so spot on, your boss may still get upset or may get defensive about the feedback. That's the risk you're going to take. If you were asked for the feedback, you should hold your ground and remind your manager that the feedback was requested and that your intention is to help him to be successful. Sometimes reframing the feedback can help, so frame it in terms of what the boss cares about. You can point out specific ways that specific behaviors are inhibiting the boss from achieving his goals. And engage your boss's reaction to determine how your boss likes to receive feedback and what topics are out of bounds. Sometimes I've seen assistants get hung up on a certain something that the manager is doing. And in all reality, it's none of the assistant's business. So if you're hung up on one behavior and it's not something that's illegal, it's not something that HR should know about, let it go. Let it go. Make sure that you're thinking about your boss and what he cares about and what's going to help them to be successful. What I'm talking about is maybe your boss doesn't want to hear feedback about their communication style or a certain high pressure initiative. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's up to you to gauge what's going to work best. So rather than climbing up after a negative reaction, take the opportunity to check in with your boss and find out what would be useful going forward. And principle number 5, when in doubt, pause and reflect. If you're not sure if your boss wants to hear feedback or if the subject of the feedback is a sensitive one, wait until the time is right for the message to be heard. I'm not saying you can't have difficult conversations. Those are definitely needed. What I'm saying is there is no reason to risk your working relationship or your job unless you feel your boss's behavior is putting you, the group, or the company in jeopardy. And most importantly, focus on developing the partnership with your boss so that you can openly and honestly give and receive feedback from each other. Start out with something small. I remember I was walking with my manager to a senior manager meeting. He's about ready to get up on stage and address 200 managers. And when I look up at him, I notice that he has a dirty nose. And at first I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to tell him. I feel really awkward. I'm uncomfortable. And then I'm thinking, seriously, are you going to let him walk in and let everyone else see that he's got a dirty nose? So I simply looked up at him and said, you got a dirty nose. He quickly reached in his pocket, pulled out a Kleenex, cleaned his nose, kind of looked at me, gave me that, Mom, am I okay? Said, yep, you're good to go. Start out with something small, and when you do, it builds trust. And then as the relationship grows, you can talk about things that are much more serious, things that involve a reorg, things that involved personnel reviews. You can point out if your manager seems to be favoring one of the staff over another. There's so many things that you can build upon, but you've got to start small. And make sure that you write it down. When you tell your boss that they're not meeting your expectations, it's pretty scary. So don't rely on your improv skills. Take time to collect and write down your thoughts. Do the pros and cons, and then jot down a few general areas of concern. Focus on the issues you think are truly critical and any supporting details that will help to spark the memory of the situation and have a productive discussion. And then stick to the script. Keep the discussion focused on the topics you've prepared to address, and never send these notes to anyone via email. Just write them down the good old-fashioned way. Unless there's a serious problem, no one needs to know about this but you and your boss. And as important as preparing what you'll say is spending time thinking about how you'll say it. Tone is so important. Your words are so important. You got to write it all down. And remember, stay classy, professional, kind, and private. Keep this meeting in private. The way that you begin this interaction will set the tone for the entire discussion, and it can mean the difference between a really great conversation or a terrible one. If you need a role play, seek out a trusted mentor. But the bottom line, keep it classy, professional, kind, and private. When dealing with your boss, it can be easy to forget that they're human. They have imperfections like the rest of us. They can fall short and not do things perfectly just like the rest of us. When we forget that they're human, we can assume that their skin is impervious to criticism, but trust me, it is not. So rather than simply telling your boss point blank you think they're doing something wrong, approach them privately and ask if you could schedule some time to talk. Approach this carefully. Take time. Make sure that they know that the reason that you're sharing this information with them is to help them to be successful. Start small, and then you can go bigger. I want each of you to know that I am so thankful that you have joined this webinar. I appreciate your attention, and I would be grateful to form a powerful partnership with you. I am on Facebook and LinkedIn, and Twitter and YouTube and Pinterest, and I would be delighted to connect with you via social media. I've got a bonus session link here that you can go to for additional information. And from this day forward, never, ever, ever, ever say, I'm just an admin again. Thank you so much.